I'm going to talk more about the secure beef supply plan. Now, there are secure milk, secure pork, secure egg, and secure poultry, and who knows, or maybe another secure or something. But I'm pretty much going to talk about beef because beef is king in Kansas, and it's what I know best. A lot of similarities, though, and as Justin suggested, we intentionally want there to be a lot of similarities between the various plans. So, this secure beef supply process has a lot of partners involved. So there's representatives from all phases of the industry, from packers and truckers to feedlots to cow-calf and livestock auction markets, stockers. We have a little bit of everybody on this steering committee that helps us engage with the industry and understand what's going on and how to best make a plan that both controls a foot and mouth disease outbreak in the case of cattle. And for cattle, it's really all we're dealing with right now. And manages to maintain the industry. So, as someone else said, that we don't want to destroy the industry while we destroy foot and mouth disease. So we need to come up with a plan whereby we can robustly intervene and control the outbreak without wiping out the industry in the process. So NCBA is involved, American Association of Bovine Practitioners, veterinary consultants. We have federal and state officials. The Kansas Department of Ag has been very engaged in this process, at least with the beef part of it. I wasn't involved with the others. So you should be proud of your Kansas Department of Ag because they are as engaged in this and do as much work planning for this as any state in the nation, maybe more than any state. From an academic standpoint, Iowa State University and Kansas State University is who's involved with the secure beef supply. There's been other academic partners in some of the others. And USDA Cattle Health Programs does fund this. So you all know this, but FMD is a highly contagious disease, and maybe, if not the, at least one of the most contagious diseases that man or animal. All cloven hoofed species are susceptible, and that would include wildlife like wild pigs, feral swine, as well as deer and elk. We haven't had it since 1929, so one thing we have is an absolutely naive population. There's no immunity to foot and mouth disease here, should it come. It is not a public health or food safety concern. So there are rare and mild cases of foot and mouth disease in people. Usually you have to be immunocompromised, and it's kind of a mild flu-like illness. Not a big deal. It is, and I'm sure you all know this, but it's different than hand, foot, and mouth disease, which is a human virus, entirely different thing, but the public often confuses those. So we need to be able to help straighten some of those things out. So foot and mouth disease is not a public health or food safety concern. That's an important message. And so the secure beef supply plan is really about developing response plans for the U.S. And it's largely about how do we develop this robust control effort and at the same time maintain as much continuity of business as we can, meaning business goes on for beef producers, but we still manage to get the disease controlled. So for premises that have no evidence of infection, we try to let them carry on business as normal as much as possible. So we have to identify movements that are really low risk and we should allow them to go. And we have to identify movements that are not low risk and stop them. And in the past, the approach was pretty much, we're going to stop movement, period. And that actually, from a disease control standpoint, that's probably the best thing. But it has some serious issues for the industries. So initially, we focused on the movement of animals to processing and the whole system related to the movement of beef cattle from a feed yard to a processing plant. And as we've continued to develop this year beef supply plan, we've moved back to where we're starting to look now at movement of animals between production phases and how do we do that in a way that controls risk? So one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is just trying to have conversations with the different sectors of the industry so that they talk together and we identify what the issues are that we're going to need to control and deal with. So again, it's a very collaborative effort, and all of these secure food supply plans are really just guidance. Ultimately, the responsible regulatory official will make the decisions that they deem necessary to control the outbreak. But these provide guidance for them for how to do that in a way that's conducive to the survival of the industry. So there's several working groups in the Secure Beef Supply Plan, and they're listed out here. I'll kind of go through each one of these in just a minute here. The first one is a managed movement working group, and myself and Dr. Christy Hamthorne, who some of you no doubt know, are working on that here at K-State. And the issue really is how do we control risk and maintain continuity of business in the sense of the ability to move livestock, in this case, beef. One of the issues is what do you do at the beginning of an outbreak? And Dr. Jim Roth at Iowa State University came up with the analogy of what happened at 9/11. Now, this is obviously quite different than that in many ways, and yet there's an instructive parallel, I think, in that when the planes went into the towers, you couldn't tell, there's a bunch of other planes in the air, and they don't know what might be going on those planes, or who might be trying to take over one of them to do something. So you can't say, well, stop movement, shut off the engine, crash where you may. You can't move anymore. Pointer straight down. You have to land the planes. So that's going to be initially our recommendations, and that's what Kansas is planning to do is initially we're going to try to identify everybody and send them somewhere, hopefully just onto their destination. If there really appear to be a high-risk movement, a diversion site where we can keep them away from everything else. But we're going to initially land the planes, and then there's going to be a period of stop movement. I think most state animal health officials, I agree that academia is pretty good at acronyms and having letters to stand for things, and state government's a little better maybe, and USDA that's the PhD in acronymity. SAHOs are state animal health officials. It took me a long time to figure that out. So I expect they're going to close borders. I think all of them are likely just going to close their borders, and frankly, I think that's a good plan. Producers are going to need to be able to manage their risk. And USDA increasingly, and following the HPAI outbreak, they started to use language that suggested that indemnity payments may be connected to whether or not you have, or a producer has, adequately implemented biosecurity to protect themselves. So, something the producer should think about as things go forward. So producers are going to need to manage their own risks substantially, and that includes how do we manage cattle until we can move them, as well as what do I want to accept, and how do I want to manage to try to keep my herd free. So the next phase will be how do we restart movement. There'll be a period, I expect, where there just won't be any movement, and I think that's wise. As hard as it may be to deal with, we need to have some time to do our tracebacks, and that's part of why those certificates of veterinary inspection are important and why it's really valuable that KDA has them electronically, because that makes that faster and more accurate. The quicker we can figure out who's moved where, we can identify who is on risky premises and start to take some steps with them and begin to restart movement for others that are low-risk movements. So we're spending a lot of time about how do we restart movement in a way that's safe. So some of this has already been covered. Here's the little quarantine zone issue again. There'll be these control areas that will be established at the beginning of an outbreak and movement restrictions put in place. I would say days to weeks at least before we can have much confidence moving things and not moving foot and mouth disease around. for this control area, there likely won't be any movement that isn't permitted. You won't move anything without getting a permit to do so. And to get that permit, producers are going to need to provide to USDA and the veterinarians there, the regulatory officials, actually maybe the state animal health officials, some level of assurance that they are not going to contribute to spread of disease. That may include things like records on previous cattle movements, feed movements, where those came from, as well as anything where it went. It may include, probably will include, some sort of surveillance records that demonstrate a lack of clinical FMD. So daily observation logs. This works fairly well in feed yards. Most of those cattle are being looked at every day anyway. And people are trained to be looking at cattle and identifying signs. We need them to be trained to identify FMD if it's there. So we've coined this active observational surveillance, and we'll just formalize the recording of what was observed in a pen of cattle. And if there's no evidence of infection, then the likelihood that this yard is not infected is better, it's higher. It's certainly not proven. And then producers are going to need to have contingency plans to manage cattle without movement. So we spent a bunch of time with the packers and processors. And again, FMD is not a public health food safety risk. If the public, and there will be websites that will pop up that will start to promulgate that idea, that it is a food safety risk, that these are diseased animals we can't eat. If the public, if that gets traction and the public starts to believe that, then our plans are not going to make a whole lot of difference, because that will destroy the beef industry and probably the milk industry and probably the pork industry, and it will make it so much worse. So we actually have a communications group that's working on trying to be ready to counter that. But back to packers and processors. If animals pass ante and post-mortem inspection by FSIS, they are safe and wholesome to eat. Whether or not they have FMD, even if they have active clinical lesions, they're still safe to eat. Now, FSIS is not going to pass something with active clinical lesions. But even if they were, it'd still be safe. So our recommendation would be to continue processing healthy animals. There is no reason to stop. Killing them eliminates any potential virus amplification and further spread, and certainly reduces the need for carcass disposal, because we can actually consume those, and it retains valuable protein and nutrition. So if we had a yard that was in a control zone, we want to just keep killing those cattle. So biosecurity is another issue in the Secure Beef Supply Plan, and the goal there is to keep FMD off of the premises. So again, this is about helping producers protect their herd and developing biosecurity performance standards that would do that. So when foot and mouth disease shows up in the U.S., or hopefully if, but when or if, regular levels of biosecurity are not going to be sufficient. They will not. If you just keep doing things as you're doing things, and cattle come and cattle go, and feed trucks come and feed trucks go, like usual, the only thing that will keep you from getting FMD is pure dumb luck. The biosecurity that will be required will be expensive and very inconvenient. But I will tell you, FMD on your operation will also be very expensive and very inconvenient. So the stuff that we're recommending here is not stuff I would recommend that you do now. I don't think it's economical. Some of the things that we will say you need to do, it's not economical right now. Once FMD shows up, it will be economical, and it will be required for you to be able to move cattle off of one of your producers' premises. So again, it's the producer's responsibility, and the USDA has been fairly clear about this, to keep their animals from becoming infected. That means they need to have a good biosecurity plan. It needs to be site-specific, and that there isn't a generic biosecurity plan that just fits everybody. So that's a great place for you. In fact, we really need veterinarians to oversee these plans, because it's you that understand the biological issues well enough, as well as the production system issues well enough to design a biosecurity plan that is site-specific. One of the things that will mean is having a biosecurity officer identified, and that could be you, potentially, as well as a line of separation around the premises that serves as a barrier, which we call outside and potentially contaminated, and inside, and that's our operation, and we want to keep it from becoming contaminated. So it may be sort of a conceptual thing, although you will draw it on a map. There may not be a fence, but it's where you don't want anything to cross that line. So this biosecurity officer is going to write the plan with the assistance of a veterinarian, unless he is a veterinarian, and serve as the point person on farm to oversee training, implementation, and has the authority to ensure compliance. And that will, of course, require some training issues. So here is the latest version, just May 2017, for the Information Manual for Enhanced Biosecurity for FMD Prevention of Beef Feedlots. Available on the website. I'll give you the website in a bit. So here's the idea of this line of separation. So the red line here is a line of separation around the feed yard. You can see that jogs in here, and that's cattle receiving, and that's blown up down here. So you can see the way this goes. You could have potentially trucks come in here to either drop off cattle or pick up cattle and not cross the line of separation. That means that you don't necessarily have to go to as great a lengths in decontaminating the truck as you would if they crossed the line of separation, because now they've entered your premises and it's got to be clean. If they never enter, then you don't have to. So you treat all this as dirty, and the trucks can come, the trucks can go. I'm not saying there's no risk there. I'm saying the management of this, maintaining this line and treating this as dirty and this is clean, can help you manage the issues related to the biosecurity requirements. So basically, we're going to have this line and we're going to control where you can cross it, and hopefully define some ways that you can do some of commerce without crossing it. Obviously, if you bring in a load of positive cattle, it's not they're going to cross the line. But this will alleviate some of the needs to wash trucks, if we can set it up this way. Because if we can't, then we're going to have to. So one of the issues would be then there isn't any traffic from the yard that goes across here all the time. These guys park here, but they never enter the yard. Or if they do, they cross the line of separation. So we can treat that as dirty and not have to wash trucks as much, is the short answer. There's a bunch of biosecurity posters for farm activities, for visitors that have cattle contact. They're in English and Spanish, and they're on the website at securebeef.org. So surveillance is another piece of the secure beef supply plan. So obviously, if we're going to manage a foot and mouth disease outbreak in the U.S., we have to detect it. And once we've detected the initial one, we need to detect any other birds. And the earlier we can do that, the better. In fact, if we're delayed, if we're slow in identifying the first case, that's a great predictor of having a much larger outbreak. And if we're slow subsequently, if we're always late identifying positive herds, then we give a longer period of time for them to spread infection before we get the right sort of biosecurity operations in place. So early detection is really important. We have some difficulties, though, because of how cattle are handled and how FMD acts. We can do PCR testing, and the test is quite good. It's very good on clinical or suspect animals that you think look like they have disease. They have oral lesions, coronary band lesions, maybe teeth lesions, whatever the case may be. The PCR works really well. But if you try to apply it to non-clinical animals, just start applying it to animals in general because we'd like to identify, prove they're negative, it doesn't work so well. It's not a great test. In fact, tests generally aren't really good at proving that animals are negative. So applied that way, the test is just not great. So currently, we don't have any sampling scheme or method that would provide, say, a 95% confidence that cattle or swine are FMD negative. So that makes this a little harder than it was for HPAI, because they had a validated protocol whereby they could test animals and be confident that the herd was positive or negative. Not 100%, but if they done the testing that they were supposed to do and found no positives, they could be 95% sure that that flock was negative, and that's pretty good certainty for shipment. We don't have that for FMD and livestock. There isn't any way to be 95% sure that this premises is negative before we allow a shipment. So that leaves us with some difficulties. But our goal is to show a lack of evidence of infection so that cattle can move. It certainly decreases the likelihood that we're sending off a positive shipment. So that's these, again, cattle health monitors, or this active observational surveillance, where we have a history of observing cattle on that feedlot. We know what have been the morbidity, the endemic, the observed diseases for the last 3 weeks. The monitors are trained to look for FMD signs, so not just BRD and boulders, but FMD signs. Those observations need to be recorded daily. It's not going to be good enough for USDA or KDA to give you a permit if you said, oh yeah, we look at them every day, they've been fine. They won't accept that. And you've got to have it in a form where you can share that information. There'll probably still be accredited veterinarians that are involved, and maybe doing all herd inspections prior to a loadout, assuming we can have enough veterinarians to do it. So I know you're all on the front of your seat thinking, how can my producers become involved in the secure beef supply plan? Well, prior to an outbreak, the things that would help get them prepared is to have a requested national premise ID number. Develop this enhanced biosecurity plan, and our guidelines are only done for feed yards right now. More of them will be developed. Designate a feedlot personnel to conduct FMD surveillance, so you need to know who's going to be doing that when a feed yard is likely the cowboys. And maintain good movement records. If FMD comes and you want to make a movement after that, and USDA shows up to decide whether or not you're going to get your permit, one of the things they're going to want to do, you're going to fill out an EPI questionnaire, and they're going to want records of all of the movements, potentially for the last 4 weeks, at least the last 2. And if you can't provide that, you're probably not going to get a permit. So once FMD is diagnosed, you're going to have to implement your enhanced biosecurity plan. You're going to have to start conducting that surveillance that's focused on detecting FMD signs. And that could be, to some extent, there should be some ongoing training, but some of that could be just-in-time training. Once it's in the country, you should train your feedlot cowboys to have an immediate refresher course on this is what FMD looks like. And then you'll need to complete that epidemiology questionnaire that looks at all of your practices and starts to try and assess how risky would a move from this premises be. So to get this movement permit, likely both the origin and the destination are going to have a PIN. If they don't, probably not going to get a permit. They'll have to have the enhanced biosecurity implemented, be doing active observation and surveillance, be keeping movement records, and the destination state and the origin state are going to have to agree on the movement. And the destination premises is going to have to be willing to accept the risk. So there is also, if you're interested, either because you're just really keenly interested or because you've got an insomnia problem, there is actually a permitted movement draft. And it actually is good. I don't mean to be good, but it's not the most exciting reading. It won't keep you up at night. So there's also a lot of work continuing to go on with the Packers, including a lot of discussions between the Packers and FSIS and USDA APHIS related to how are we going to handle this? And how is FSIS going to respond when they see the lesion the first time? And we've made a lot of progress with them in terms of this is not a food safety risk. We don't have to close down the plant and disinfect. It becomes a positive plant, and we don't necessarily have to stop all operations from that plant. So the North American Meat Institute has been really, really engaged in working with FSIS, USDA, APHIS, and the Packers. So there's also this communications and outreach group, and they have, well, actually this part isn't part of them. So we've also done, just generally, the group has done some communications and outreach related to publishing articles. Iowa Cattlemen's has published a series of articles for us. The NCBA Beef Issues Quarterly has. We've given updates numerous times at NCBA and ABC and AAVP. There's been webinars. We're actually on the docket for the 2017 AAVP conference in Omaha to give something of an overview of this. So getting the word out has been is a priority for the group. So there's also then this, and this is what I started to talk about before, this cross-species communications working group. Susan Solarion and Darren Williams from NCBA are leading that effort. And there is this website called footandmouthdiseaseinfo.org. It has a bunch of really good info. Some of it really good for veterinarians, a lot of it really useful for producers as well. So if you're interested and if your producers are interested, this is a great site. Awareness is actually a pretty important part of this piece. There's also a number of websites already developed with messages out there that are right now not active. They're dark. The minute FMD shows up, those websites are ready to come live and have a whole bunch of information about FMD, the outbreak that's in the U.S., what that means. No, it's not a food safety news. A lot of issues about how this may be handled and that sort of thing. So we're already ready with a lot of information to go. And I think that's an important point. And in crisis communications, if you wait until the crisis starts to develop your message, it's going to go badly for you. So they've done a bunch of work on that. There's a bunch available. There's one other issue I want to talk about briefly, and that is management of infected premises. So 10 years ago, the USDA plan was stamping out. In fact, that was pretty much the plan everywhere prior to the 2001 UK outbreak. If foot and mouth disease comes, we're going to stamp it out, and that's it. In the UK, they talked a little bit about vaccination, but never did it. At the same time, Uruguay had an outbreak. And they started a stamping out program. It lasted about 3 or 4 days, I think, before the producers said, we're not doing this anymore. And they quit and started a vaccination program. Now, no two outbreaks are the same. You can't compare the UK's and the Uruguay's directly. But Uruguay was done with theirs way sooner. They killed like 3,000 head of cattle, vaccinated everybody, all the cattle, and were basically done with their outbreak fairly quickly, a matter of months. The UK killed several millions of animals. But it started USDA to thinking, maybe we need a different plan, and so vaccination has come on the scene much, much more than it was, and it may be that we will vaccinate. Right now, the biggest issue is we don't have a vaccine. So we actually couldn't vaccinate very many if we wanted to. But it's also brought up the idea and started people to thinking, starting about 10 years ago, is what do you do with a 50,000 head feed yard that's broke with FMD? If you start working through the logistics of how you're going to euthanize all those and dig a hole big enough to bury them, it doesn't work out all that well. Not to mention, if it's actually a control area that's in the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas and southwest Kansas, how many cattle can be killed? And that's not to mention it's safe for food consumption, and we're just sacrificing all that protein. So there's been a fair amount of thought of what are our alternatives. Well, one of the alternatives, if we can't actually euthanize them fast enough, is how do we manage them in place to recover? And that's been a very sticky wicket. So there's just some issues there. We really don't know what will happen. We don't have any prior experience with large feedlots where we just let FMD run through the feed yard and we allow them to recover. So there actually is a draft guidance document done that deals with some issues related to biocontainment to prevent spread and managing cattle health, and a plan for euthanasia of severely affected animals, and marketing of recovered animals, trying to look at some economic viability issues and how that feed yard premises would regain FMD-free status. And it's not a rosy scenario. I actually have a grad student also working on building a mathematical model of how would FMD behave in a large feed yard. And that's our best estimates right now of what might happen. And it's not a real rosy scenario, but it may be better than trying to kill them all and dig that big hole. So we continue to work on a bunch of stuff, all of the things that I've talked about, and including moving back up the chain of the beef production system and engaging stakeholders to try and build something that works to control disease and, as much as possible, also works for producers to maintain business continuity. So that's the end of this. The general email, you can certainly contact me if you'd like, but also the general email for the Secure Beef Supply Plan is sbsinfo@iowastate.edu, and the website is securebeef.org. There's a bunch of stuff on there related to each of the things we've talked about: biosecurity templates, the managed movement draft document, surveillance plans, those sort of things if you have more interest in it.